Welcome to the Gavel. I am Terry Ikumi. Now, the House of Representatives has suspended public hearings and committee meetings. A statement signed by the Majority Leader, Adodogowa, says the leadership met and resolved to suspend all activities of standing and ad hoc committees until the House resumes from its annual recess. This was not well received by the public and even some lawmakers, basically because there was no explanation for the suspension. In fact, many have questioned the motive behind the decision, with some suggesting a cover-up following the many revelations that have popped up from the public hearings. Well, the House is alone on that one, as the Senate hasn't issued such a notice. In fact, while the Senate is on recess, the Joint Committee on Finance and National Planning has commenced work on the Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper. Let's find out how that went in the past week. When the Joint Senate Committee on Finance and National Planning met with the Minister of Aviation at the public hearing on the Mtf and Fsp, the committee sought clarification on some accounts being operated by agencies under the ministry.
Looking at what is currently confronting us as a nation, we believe that such funds should be judiciously applied. To our greatest surprise, the entire 9-point-something billion was used as recurrent expenditure, which covers training, which covers payment of dues to some international organizations. And aside all of that, nothing fundamental that this said amount was used for. That is one of our discoveries. Secondly, we noticed that the same agency maintained a below-the-line account, which include the BASA fund and the Security and Safety Fund. These two funds reside in the books of these agencies. But in one of the testimony that we were informed by this agency, we were told that they only maintain this fund in their account, but the utilization of that fund is not within their prerogative. That is only within the prerogative of the Honorable Minister, who has the authority to sign. And they also informed this distinguished Senate that the said fund is applied to all agencies that are under the aviation ministries.
The way the BASA and the security accounts are made, BASA is for aviation development. If it is for aviation development, therefore it means that it can be utilized by INCAD especially, which is the College of Aviation Technology, be utilized by FAN, by NCA, by NAMA, by NIMET, by all the agencies, because it's meant for development of civil aviation. And development of civil aviation entails all of these agencies to work in unison to create that system where the aviation is working perfectly and efficiently. So for that reason, all of these agencies will be sharing that money. If you look at even the Act of Civil Aviation that we passed, this National Assembly passed, is such that there are certain percentages that goes to all of them to be utilized, covered by Act. Security, even though is not amoebic, if you like, it has boundaries and definition, but it exists in every single part of the agency. And this can be utilized better when they are centrally collected and then redistributed. As to the question that the minister has the authority to pass, it's also an act of law. I mean, they cannot spend foreign exchange without the approval of the minister, so that there is control on the foreign exchange that we have.
The minister also spoke on the plan by the federal government to concession some of the nation's airports.
Because we know what will happen to this business, that's why we now introduce in our roadmap, for example, the concession of our airports. The concession of our airports. We've now done the outline business case. We are going ahead for the procurement to concession this airport. And the reason is simple. I've said this before this National Assembly, this is for improved revenue. We are very sure that when we do that, we will improve the revenue of the nation.
So we have our...
Next, the committee interacted with the Securities and Exchange Commission and was disappointed that the commission was operating a deficit budget.
Actual revenue outcome of 8.532 billion, while the budget for that year, 2019, was 12.00 billion. making the actual turnout 71% of the budget itself. So we didn't collect as much as we thought we would collect in 2019.
What you are generating is not enough to even pay your staff. Not to talk less of the overhead expenditure. So within 2019 alone, by the time we bring in your expenditure and the deficit from salaries and wages, you are reporting excess of about 4 to 5 billion. How do you fund that?
Every single year, the SEC generates what it needs to spend as a regulator. And the cost of regulation is very high, distinguished Chairman.
The Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, NSCDC, was also at the hearing. The committee was dissatisfied with the figures presented by the Commandant General of the Corps.
So when we took over in the year 2003, we were given that mandate, and it was reviewed in 2007. And we are now thinking of reviewing it again. We are thinking of reviewing it again. It was reviewed in 2007, the fees. 2007, yes, sir.
We have the responsibility to manage an account. Our responsibility is not within our purview to determine fees, to adjust fees. But I understand, like you said, they are going to review now. They are in the process of reviewing now.
In 2018, we generated 383 billion, 945, 535. 383 million only. Yes, sir. Then in 2019, we generated 422 million.
I think you need to take a closer look at your projections. It looks like some of these figures are just dumped there without sufficient reasoning. Go to item number 15 on your projections. Relocation of head office. Is it a constant figure? Do you relocate head office every year? Relocation of head office in 2001. Relocation of head office in 2002. Relocation of head office in 2003. It's constant. Is this based on history? Is a historical trend? Is that based on historical trend? Because I don't want to assume that head office of companies change almost every year.
Like you have a headquarters in Abuja, and you want to move your headquarters to Lagos, then you pay.
Is it like a yearly thing?
Some pay, some do it. New ones do it. They move from time to time. I have to pay.
This is nothing to write home about. And as such, we would like to have the Accountant General, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Interior, the NSCDC, regarding all these fees and charges. 2007, that was the last time this fees was reviewed, and it's a major fundamental issue.
The committee also questioned an alleged hidden account for collection of payments of services rendered by the NSCDC.
CG, I want you to tread with caution. Distinguished colleagues are here informing you that they have paid for your services before. And that shows you are hiding something from us. That shows you have an account which you are maintaining that is not known to us.
It's below the line.
It's below the line account. And he's saying it emphatically that he has paid before. And I have my colleagues at the back also say that they have paid before.
Come on.
And we are insisting that there is no such account. Please, Auditor General of the Federation, do we have him here?
It's not here.
We ask them to invite. They have to perform a status inquiry on NSCDC because we need to know the true position of things.
Being paid for services, NSCDC, I maintain my stand that we don't charge for services.
Where did you get allowances paid to start from?
They pay them, director.
From where?
They pay them where the services are being rendered.
Who paid them directly?
Where the services are being rendered. Some pay the allowances on a monthly basis.
Seize assets during operations. What happens to them?
If it's declared by the court, as I said, it's auction. We go to Federal Ministry of Works. Federal Ministry of Works will come and value them. Then it will auction. It will pay into the TC account. We have the receipts. We have evidence. Evidence if you want it, I'll bring it right. Give next week.
Where is that not in your revenue record here?
Because it's not a revenue to us. As far as we are concerned.
There is a clear distinction between revenues based on the mandate of an agency, an incidental revenue that might come from time to time. It is not in the normal line of mandate of the agency to, it's not there. It's not even given to them as a target, that revenue from confiscated agencies. But their normal mandate dwells on the areas mentioned by the CG. I don't know how many of them. Registration of private guards, fees arising from relocation of headquarters of private guard agencies. But these incidental revenues, I believe the agency, NCDC, remit them into appropriate government accounts. I think we need to look at the details into which account before we draw a conclusion.
You need to reappear next week Tuesday, and there is need for us to mandate the Auditor General of the Federation to carry out a status inquiry on the activity of NSCDC as well as revenue is concerned, as soon as possible. We need to get to the root of all of this.
The chairman of the committee further expressed worry about the remittances of government agencies, as well as those who spend a huge chunk of their revenue.
Agencies like NCA, agencies, Oil and Gas Free Trade Zone, and so many of the agencies. DPR, already they have a cost of collection of 4%, but we are looking at reduction in that cost of collection to like 3%. Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, and so many other agencies that there is need for us, because we are confronted with a problem of you generate revenue, you spend that revenue, and at the same time you are operating in the national budget. And I don't believe as a country and at this point in time we have the luxury, we have the fund to play around with, that we have an agency that collects personnel, overhead, and capital. And at the same time, that agency generates between 3 to 4 billion and spend the entire fund. And at the end of the financial year, remit just a paltry sum of 80% of its operational surplus, bulk of which has been taken over by their overhead costs. So that is one area. Photographers, please, you are disturbing us. That's one major area we are looking at. Secondly, there has been confusion over the idea of administrative guidelines issued by your office. And the administrative guideline, it's about paying certain percentage of your revenue into the coffers of the federal government before deduction of expenditure or any other items. And we make it known to the agencies that it is not known to us. The only thing that is known to us is the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and which clearly states that at the end of every financial year, 80% of your operational surplus must be remitted into the Consolidated Revenue Fund account. We need a copy of that administrative guidelines. And I also inform that if there is need for us to amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Office of Accountant General, Finance, and even the Office of Fiscal Responsibility Act can, as a matter of urgency, put together this amendment and bring it alongside with the appropriation bill.
Welcome back to the Gavel. Our next report takes a look at activities at the National Assembly in the past week, including the meetings held by the new clerk of the National Assembly. At one of those, he promised that the National Assembly would adopt the e-Parliament system. But first, let's conclude on the Senate hearing on the Mtf and Fsp. After years of non-implementation of the extant laws empowering the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI, from drawing 1% allocation from the Federation account, the Senate on Tuesday ordered for compliance. The upper legislative chamber specifically directed the Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, to effect commencement of the remittance into NASENI's coffers from September this year, following the submission of the Vice Chairman of NASENI, Professor Mohammed Haruna, on revenue projections of the agency for the 2021 budget before the Senate's Joint Committee on Finance and National Planning.
Sometimes in some months, several days, sometimes NASENI receive as low as 4 million as overhead and some months no cost. Yet, we are committed, we need to create activities, develop activities that will create a lively environment that will lead the country to be a knowledge-based economy, a manufacturing economy. But I want to tell you, Chairman Sir, that the things NASENI is receiving, you can as well say Nigeria is yet to commence payment for research and development.
Using this medium-term expenditure framework and going forward, 1% that is due to NASENI must be given to NASENI. That is the law. And it has been in existence for so many years. So we should start looking, working, doing everything to ensure that everything that we need to do to make sure that we effect this payment starting from next month, we should do just that.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Committee on Insurance and Actuarial Matters, just before committee meetings and hearings were suspended, resumed its investigation of government institutions and insurance companies. The committee is investigating alleged breach of insurance guidelines and non-adherence to the Insurance Act by insurance companies. The lawmakers are worried that the insurance industry is not catering to the needs of Nigerians who they enroll, despite the billions that civil servants pay for insurance cover.
This exercise was necessitated by one, alleged breaches on insurance businesses by industry practitioners. We have an insurance act, though that calls for much amendment, but notwithstanding, it's still working. But to a very great extent, adherence and compliance is a problem. So we have received thousands of petitions from different areas across board. And that calls for the reason why we have gathered to look into all these petitions, because Nigerians will be yearning to find out what is really happening in the insurance industry.
The investigative hearing began with a $100 million insurance premium allegedly paid by Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation and joint ventures for non-existing assets overseas, as well as the implementation of insurance policies of other ministries, departments, and agencies. The committee was, however, disappointed at the absence of the Group Managing Director of the NNPC.
During the introduction, which is the essence of the introduction, because you must identify yourself and your designation, that the practice of talking to the person where the buck starts and ends, that is the chief executive, which we clearly stated in the newspaper advert and the letters subsequently that was sent to your organizations, we clearly stated that we need to meet with your chief executives, the MD, so that each question we ask will not be deferred to another date or referred to another person. He has the bulk to define every question and interpret it the way we can understand it best. But it's only to my greatest surprise that is the one person that introduced himself, the Deputy Chairman, the CEO of Hog Robinson.
GMD would have been here, but I met him this morning to accompany him here, but he had to stay behind because he had to resolve the ongoing Pengas and Nupeng issue. If not, the whole of us will find ourselves in a big mess in the country. So he asked me to come here. Well, the letter is on its way, delegating me to represent him.
The new clerk of the National Assembly has tasked the Benue State House of Assembly Commission against political influences. The acting clerk, Olatunde Ojo, at a meeting with representatives of the Commission, further stated that the management of the National Assembly would support the Commission to succeed in its assignment. Meanwhile, the National Assembly clerk, Olatunde Ojo, had earlier interacted with members of the Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement, YAGA, who were in his office to congratulate him on his new appointment.
Congratulations.
Beyond the congratulations, Yaga made some requests, one of which was for the National Assembly to consider adopting e-Parliament.
There is a huge opportunity that avails you as a clerk of the National Assembly to promote openness and transparency within the National Assembly. This is one institution that is most misunderstood by Nigerians, and rightly so, because the communication and public engagement with citizens has not been as we would have desired. And as a clerk, I think there's a lot of expectations that, given your experience and also your disposition, that you will bring that to bear as in this leadership role in providing citizens access to the National Assembly, as well as citizens' participation. It is very, very important, and there are diverse ways this can happen. With the COVID-19 pandemic, technology provides a huge opportunity, and so e-Parliament should be a top agenda.
We want to make sure that in National Assembly to help e-Parliament, to make sure that we help operation of e-Parliament, we have to develop our ICT properly, so that even if you come into National Assembly, God helping us, whether you are a pressman, you belong to this or you don't belong to this, you can easily log on, and then you can access anywhere in the world. You can access us. We make accessibility to lawmaking and activities of National Assembly free. Our capacity development, therefore, will be a continuous process, making sure that the knowledge gaps we have in various parts of National Assembly are filled up.
The group also wants the clerk to promote transparency and capacity building.
The training and retraining of our staff members, inclusive of our legislative heads also, because for us to achieve this aim, we know our staff, the generality of the staff, need proper training and retraining. And we are poised to make sure that this we do appropriately in conjunction with already organizations who are willing to support us, to back us up in this venture.
Now, just before we go, the PDP caucus in the House of Representatives has rejected and dissociated itself from the Special Public Works Program of the federal government. A press statement signed by its chairman, Kingsley Chinda, strongly admonishes its members to ignore the letters written to the senators and House of Representatives members by APC state coordinators of the National Directorate of Employment on behalf of the Minister of State, Labor and Employment, asking them to nominate 30 and 25 individuals respectively from each local government area in their constituency. And according to the statement, the caucus considers this correspondence a condemnable attempt to bribe and hoodwink the institution of the National Assembly into complicity in the misapplication of Nigeria's scarce resources for the implementation of a questionable, misguided, absurd, and arguably unlawful scheme that alarmingly intends to expend 52 billion naira under the guise of creating employment for only 3 months. It also refers to the program as the most unsustainable employment scheme implemented by any government. Well, the PDP caucus ends the statement by saying that the only path to redemption for the 9th Assembly is to refuse to fund the program subsequently until the executive engages the legislature appropriately. Well, let's see how the leadership of the National Assembly reacts to this after the recess. Well, that's the Gavel this week. Send your feedback and questions to the Gavel at channelstv.com. I am Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.